I'd like to acknowledge Australia's First Nation people as the traditional custodians of the land, and for this episode in particular, the Ngunnawal people. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging.
It was really sort of going from someone who just touched their toes in wine in Australia to being straight into these sort of French wines was quite a big turnaround for me, and again just sort of it enhanced that sort of I like wine.
This is Over a Glass. I'm Shanteh Wale. Bryan Martin is one of Australia's nicest winemakers, known for his natural talent with the grape and a smile that would soften any frown. His Ravensworth Wines, made in the Canberra district, will win you over with their character and finesse. Hi Bryan, thanks for joining me.
Hi, nice to be here.
Bryan, you've had a few lifetimes of adventures. There's no way I'm going to let you sum it up in one paragraph, so instead, tell me a little bit about your first memory of wine.
I guess it sort of goes back really to when I first started working in hospitality, and this was sort of in the mid-'80s. And I started working at a hotel here in Canberra. That was quite ahead of its time. It was one of the first sort of atrium hotels around, had a really good wine, sort of cocktail bar and restaurant, and quite a good wine list at the time. And I just remember just drinking this Chardonnay that was made by Brian Crozer when he was at the Riverina College, which was now at CSU. And so it was 1980 College Chardonnay. I just remember drinking that, and it just sort of, I'd had a bit of contact wine before then, but it just sort of changed my thoughts on wine. I thought all of a sudden I sort of had my attention, sort of thing, from that wine on, and from that point onwards, I just sort of got into it. Yeah, so sort of I was in my early 20s and just about to go off overseas on a trip, but I just sort of from then it just sort of evolved from there. When I was over in England, we worked in a really good wine bar over there, and the knowledge grew, and came back to Australia, started working for a wine retailer, and it just went on and on, the thing, and it was always that sort of hospitality retail that I was into at that time there, and it was much later obviously that I got into production.
Oh, that's a great first wine to kind of really make you stop and think. Still to this day, I think, those Petaluma and the legacy that Brian Crozer's left, but that their Chardonnays are pretty amazing. Tell me a little bit about when you moved over to England. You worked at a little wine bar that was owned by Michael Caine and Peter Langan. Tell me a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, I guess when I got there, I didn't have much money, and but I did have English heritage, so I was able to. I didn't have to have visas and that, so I was able to work over there, and so I was able to find quite a good job at the time, because most Aussies at the time they're working in pubs for their keep, so they basically just working. Well, I actually got quite a good job working this little called Langan's Langan's Wine Bar, Langan's Bistro, but it was he had a few restaurants in that area in Mayfair. And this one was attached to the Down Street Hotel, 7 Down Street, a little tiny 6-room hotel that was owned by at the time by the Rolling Stones. So this little really cool little restaurant. It was like I was on the floor when I started there. Then I started working the bar, and then I was sort of running the wine list there. Just had a great little range of French wines. I just remember there's sort of a lot of Bordeaux. So they had not many first growths, but a lot of class growths there. And I just remember people really drank them. And the owner, Peter Langan, he was a real sort of really known for his drinking capability at the time, and he had a great champagne list there as well. I just remember he used to always come in if he came for breakfast, he'd be having a bottle of Bardi Bollinger and that sort of stuff. So it was just a really cool hotel, and each of the rooms had a different theme, and the wine list was had a really nice cellar downstairs for the proper wine list with a dumb waiter to bring the wine up, and I just sort of really sort of again sort of got me, I guess, more off the floor, and just really focused on just being in the bar, and it was just a really cool place to work. It closed down. I left. It had been sold and was closed down, and I left and worked another place in not too far away. But that was always quite a interesting time, just seeing those sort of wines for the first time. Had a lot of wines from Loire as well, and lots of muscadets and all that sort of thing. So it was really sort of going from someone who just touched their toes in wine in Australia to being straight into these sort of French wines was quite a big turnaround for me, and again just sort of it enhanced that sort of. This is I like wine. You know, food was as much important to me, always has been, but wine was really getting up there then, and I really like working there. I was a bit sort of I don't know, a bit disappointed when it did close down, but they sold it, and yeah, I ended up going off and working on a cruise ship in America after then. so there was nothing to do with wine at all.
Peter Langham was like a notorious restaurateur and sadly died when he was fairly young, which is really sad. What did you have much to do with him? Did you meet him, like you said, just serving him on the odd occasion?
Yeah, more just being one of the people there, but he was intense. Like he was. You know, he seemed like he was pretty drunk most of the time he was around, and at the time Michael Caine was just as bad. he sobered up, but unfortunately Peter Langham didn't get to that age. So he was quite the person, and very much that sort of that classic restaurateur that sort of just ate well, and like he'd just be always eating and drinking, and it was just. It was fascinating to watch because I've come across a few people like that since then that have survived. so yeah, no, it was quite.
Well, that's nice because I feel like sometimes people like that, they have such a love of food and wine, and unfortunately we kind of remember them because of their demise in that way. But, we have these amazing cellars and beautiful restaurants to thank them for that live on in their kind of legacy. And it must have been nice working with these incredible wines. Were you just kind of self-teaching yourself along the way as you kind of were selling wines?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was just sort of just reading and reading all those books that you do, and just sort of just slowly learning them. Not in any sort of formal fashion. I mean, there wasn't really any sort of courses that, but I just sort of I just remember, and the people that worked in the restaurant winter as well. So I think it is the people that you tend to work with that sort of draw you on as well. So I just found that we were trying lots of wine, and whereas I think a lot of my other Aussie brethren at the time were probably just drinking in bars, just drinking and that sort of stuff. So I felt quite lucky to be able to, with very little experience, because it wasn't to actually be able to do that over there, because there weren't many of us doing working in those sort of places.
Wow, that's so cool. I mean, that Langham's Brasserie was an institution, and I just imagine to be able to go back and just spend, like a few days watching the people that come and go. That would have been just pretty sensational. Did you run into people you have good memories of?
Yeah, well, there's lots of famous people who used to come through there, and I remember once I was in the bar, sort of serving trying to convince the next James Bond actor for me to make him a martini, but he didn't drink. So it was George Lazenby, so he was essentially a local. But yeah, anyway, so.
Well, look, if you had made that epic martini, maybe we would have lost you to the bar community. So I'm very glad that it worked out that way.
Would have been such a good story. But anyway.
So true. Tell me a little bit about what you did next in terms of working on the Americanas. My mother, spent a long time traveling on some of those big cruise ships, kind of, going to and from England, or when she went on travels. And she'd tell me these crazy stories about the passengers going through. Tell me a little bit about what it was like as a waiter on those ships.
Because I was hired. And a friend of mine who I knew over there as well. We both got these jobs with this company, and we're both sort of flown to Florida to wait for our ship to come in. And Justin went off to do this cruise ship that went up to Alaska, but I got on this. I was sent back to New York and on this the Americana. So it was sort of this old school sort of station. I'm not sure if you've been on a cruise. I mean, this put me off ever being on a boat again. so basically, what we did as a station waiter, we had 3 tables of 4 people, 2 sittings, for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then they always had midnight buffet. So we'd attend those same people for the. It was basically a 5-day trip. We went from New York out. This is in the winter. This was in the off season for the Caribbean. So the ships all went to the Caribbean. But when I was there, it was in the time where they wouldn't go down because of the storm. So we'd go from New York out to Bermuda and back again, and then there was like a 1-night cruise within New York Harbour. So you basically have these same people to look after, and obviously mostly older American people, and they ate and ate and ate and ate. And so station waiter, we had to sort of walk around the boat with trays with the plates on it. So we'd have commies that would do all the drinks and that stuff there. But so my job was to just go collect the food. It's like a little I don't know, food court in there. We go to each station to get whatever they're having, and they just ate and ate and ate for that week. And essentially what we got paid by that company was $50 a month for work for that job. So you lived on tips, but I was the only person that was remotely European on the list. In fact, people mostly thought I was from Austria or from Israel. They never quite understood where I was from. All the other waiters were from either from sort of Central America, the Philippines, and so they all work. You make quite a lot of money. We're making about $1,000 a week. You'd make in tips, which for me, given I was working 2 jobs, was sort of still quite good. But most of the other waiters that worked there, they were sending money back to where their families were. So that was very bad. But imagine on a ship, there was no safe way. We were stacked 3 high in cabins that was 3 people up to the roof, and you had a locker, but you had all this money with you that you're collecting on the way, and so you had to walk around with the money sort of strapped to you all the time. So you had this increasing weight of bum bag, what it was, sort of with all your money in it. So you sort of got quite, I had quite a bit in the end because I was trying to save up enough to actually get back to England and then get back to Australia because I had to go back to England. So I loved Bermuda. I mean, it was just the most beautiful place there, and I was lucky again because I was English speaking and white. I was able to get. I was taken in by a lot more the people that the other staff weren't. So sort of I hate that sort of thing. But so I got to know a lot of people that were sort of further up. But it was just a really badly run ship, and it was pretty dirty. And I in the end I just said I got to get off this. I need to get back home. And so I end up, because I had my passport, I end up talking them into getting my passport back and jumped ship in New York and headed back home. So, but again, I can't ever imagine ever wanting to be on a ship again, seeing that. I know there's better versions of it, but the way people ate there was just ridiculous. It was like these people, and this was a big. You look it up online. This is a very old ship. It was retired just after, I think. In fact, I think it might have sunk or something. But it it really the way our staff were treated was awful. We were allowed a bit of time on the foredeck, but we weren't allowed to mix with the people at all. And so we had to spend this whole time telling you a story because you want these people to like you and give you money because otherwise it was just a waste of time. But yeah, so that was a very brief time in my life, but I realised that I won't never need to go on a ship again.
Gosh, I can't. Yeah, I mean, such a different way and such a different system in the way that in the past it's worked in America, and you can see why people would bend over backwards or put up with terrible behaviour from guests when it really is your lifeline towards whether you're fed or not. So, but yeah, I mean, just an incredible time. And look, I'm sure knowing you're not a huge eater that wants to gorge yourself for a week. So I can see why the pull to ships is not for you. There's plenty to discover in our amazing country. Tell me a little bit about when you returned home. Tell me a little bit about the Farmer's Brother liquor chain you worked for, because I don't know really anything about their story.
Yeah, well, so I came back to go back to Australia. I ended up working back working for the same company that I was working before. They had another hotel that's it's now called the QT, but it was the Lakeside. So I ended up working there. But I was trying to study music at the time, but I just realised that was a bit of a sort of a pathway that I was going to be at best a music teacher. So I thought this ad came in the paper for a trainee manager of Farm Brothers, and I knew Farm Brothers. They were sort of one of the local independents. They were the people that really changed liquor in Canberra, because it was David and Richard Farmer. Richard Farmer was a lobbyist for government, and they found out that they're going to deregulate the beer pricing. Say this back in the early 80s, I think it was late early 80s. So they had a shop in Manuka, and they were selling beer off the back of a truck there. But David Farmer's love was wine. He was another people like he was a bit like Peter Langan, bit reined in, but same same idea. And so they had this. They had about 3 stores in Canberra at the time, and they expanded here. But pretty quickly they realised that with me I liked working there. We moved around. They had stores in City and Belconnen, and had great wines there. A lot of Australian wines, but they were the ones that really were importing some really decent French wines back then. Like the first time I ever tried a Cote Rôtie was a Grig Ale, a half bottle that I bought for $12 from Farm Brothers. So so wine was way obviously really cheap back then, and he was the guy that brought in those single vineyard Grig Ale wines in Australia for the first time. So we were drinking those, in the 80s when they first sort of came to the market, and so I liked that, and I like this sort of thing. And so he asked me if I wanted to move to Melbourne, because they were expanding down there. So I had a couple of stores down there. And Dan Murphy's were the big one. They were, the actual Dan Murphy was the main market down there, and there was Nick's and a few others there. But Farm Brothers they were doing the same in Sydney, but they thought they could really expand down in Melbourne. So they sent me down there to work with Phil Rowe, who was the regional manager, to work as his assistant. So we just started opening up stores all over the place. So I was moving around. I'd get the store set up and get a new manager in, and move around. And Phil, he's a Kiwi, and he was probably one of the biggest effects on me for wine, because he had a great wine cellar back in New Zealand, and he loved European wines. And I had my first experience with Burgundy with him, like one of the great ones. Like we had a bottle of the it was an 85 de Vogue, and I just remember that one. And I was I guess working with Farm Brothers, I was sort of into Australian wines, so we had a really good range of Australian wines. But Phil, but he said no, so, and we were sort of drinking great Chablis and Burgundies, and he had a real love of Italian wine, and particularly from Tuscany, and that had a big effect on me, because when we came to growing grapes, Sangiovese was the first variety I planted. So working with Phil was fantastic, and it didn't work. Eventually, Farm Brothers had to, got into discounting, and like we'll bring in semi-trailers of Canunga Hill for paying $4.90 for it, and sell it for $4.99. So you can't do that for too long before you sort of run out of cash. So we end up they owned a hotel in Tasmania. So my wife is Jocelyn. We just got married. Her background was hospitality as well. So David moved me and Jocelyn down to run this hotel down in Tasmania after then. And while we're down there, the Farm Brothers went into liquidation. So and I still have contact with David. He lives in the Barossa, and he ended up paying back, as far as I understand, he ended up paying back all his debt that he had, and he's still the same sort of person. Still loves food and wine. Yeah.
That's fascinating. I didn't really know anything about them, so I love hearing that.
Well, if you look at vintage cellars is what Farm Brothers became. So all those vintage cellar stores, the original ones, they were the Farm Brothers stores, because the business was sold to Coles, and Coles developed vintage cellars from there was a couple in Sydney, so in Melbourne they had, so they were the ones that were doing really well, which is I think the one in Melbourne was the one in Brighton, and there was one in Bowen. They changed that. They were the first sort of vintage cellar stores. So that's where it ended up, was part of Coles.
Fascinating. I love that. What was your experience like in Tasmania when you were down at the hotel at Eaglehead?
Eagle Hawk Neck, yeah, it was just a fascinating time because it was this. I mean, Joss and I just got married, and we went down there, and it's called the Louvre Hotel, which is sort of still there. It still hasn't changed much, and it's like a sort of 30-room hotel with a dining room, a public bar, and that. And at the time, Tasmania was very much. This is just after going back a long time. This is after the pilot strike of the late 80s. So Tasmania tourism was basically just killed through the pilot strike. So we're still recovering there. So essentially, as far as tourism wise, we just had it was really from Christmas to Easter that you'd be busy with tourists. Other than that, you might have 1 or 2 rooms a night through the rest of the year. David did want a good restaurant because David is Tasmanian. So during the summer months we brought a chef down with us, a young chef Murray, who was we just started his apprenticeship. So during the summer months and early autumn, we'd cook really good food there. Like we'd scale. There was fantastic seafood. I still haven't seen as good a seafood as I saw back then in Tasmania. There was a fishing village there at Pirates Bay. So we would have fresh fish all the time on there, and plus all these growers were growing things like all our sort of salad greens and meats and game, and so it was just an incredible time to cook that. And I because I had my cooking at that time was being a fairly enthusiastic home cook. I wanted to learn commercial cooking, so I learned commercial cooking based just working with Murray. So I'd spend most of my time doing the back of house stuff. So I'd run in the bars or in the restaurant in the kitchen, and Jocelyn would do all the front of house stuff. So she'd man the business, and so it was quite. And we still do that now with our company now, but so so we did have a great, and we actually ended up winning quite good awards down there, all that thing there, and the food was fantastic. But then, come winter, we had to shut it all down. So then it was basically just turn on the deep fryer and cooking for the locals, and they, Eagle Neck, the bar there, the top bar, it was a bar that only recently had allowed women into it. So you want to get the idea of the times, and it was the closest bars were one in Nubina and one in Denali. So it was all the locals just basically drank spent all their money drinking in that bar there. So all the social was around that bar there. So it was a really important part of the business that it kept going. But it sort of drove you crazy because you caught up in a lot of lives that are sort of fairly, a lot of fishermen and local growers. But I guess it taught me and Jocelyn a lot about business, because the biggest problem we had with the Louvre, and the Louvre was a hotel that was set up by Reg Ansett. So when he set up his bus lines back post World War II, Le Louvre was one of his first hotels where he'd bring bus travellers down there. So, but when he set it up, there was one property above us, and the water came from a spring about sort of 3 kilometres up the hill. And that was all fine and good. But in the meantime, it had all been sold off, and so our 1-inch feed line to the hotel came through about 4 properties, and everyone would tap into it for their cow troughs and stuff like that. And the guy at the end grew drugs, so we'd have to when you ran out of siphon, it was no pump there, it was all siphon. We'd have to go and talk him into getting it going, and you have to take up beer and stuff with him and give him all the stuff to get him to start the siphon up for you. So we were trying to run a tourist hotel with this sort of 1-inch, 3-kilometre long line that was all the water we had. So with that, again, that sort of thing is that, at the time, the reason we did it because we loved the idea of getting our own little place, and that sort of put us in perspective about what you need to know before you go into it. Where's the water going, and where coming from, and where it's going, because our septic system used to sort of essentially go down through quite a little rainforest down onto the Pirates Bay beach. Which is all been tied up now, obviously, but it's, at the time then it was like this crazy thing, and all of a sudden it stopped working, and our local handyman Ray would have to go find some roadkill to get the septic going again, so it wouldn't sort of be pumping raw effluent out of the beach. so that took a lot of our time just sort of dealing with that local, but we loved it down there. Our first child, Lily, was born down there, and so we got really fond memories of it. And but when Farm Brothers went in liquidation, we we sort of had to get out of this so we ended up talking them into so we got ourselves paid out, and the property was sold. And Joss and I and Lily, we went for a big trip overseas for a few months, and trying to work out what we were going to do when we came back. Because we had a house in Melbourne at the time, so work out what we were going to do when we got back in Melbourne. So so it was sort of again one of those times in your life where you sort of see an emerging thing, and wine wasn't the main focus there. But we used to do wine dinners. Like we used to bring down winemakers from the mainland to do wine dinners down there. And we had a really good cellar down there that I loved. And when David arrived at town, he had to make sure he had all the things he needed to drink down there. so we had to maintain quite a good cellar. And,
I bet. I love that. I mean, if you take one thing out of that experience, which obviously it was such a deep and, worthwhile experience, but to have a love of cooking, to develop your passion for cooking, and like you said, to do a complete course in cooking, and then, that is in itself such a gift. You actually, when you returned back to Canberra, you were actually teaching cooking schools. Is that right?
You sort of, I guess, you get this point where you sort of, you just sort of keep moving forward, and I got a lot of this from Jocelyn. Like she's sort of, has had a real big effect on, as your partner should, about how you go about things. She's done many degrees. She's always been, sort of, and so when something said, and she was working at the time as a teacher at this Australian International Hotel School, the AIHS, which was part of the Cornell Business School at the time. And so I was teaching business, the business of running hotels at a time when full fee paying students study wasn't a thing, So most of the students were from overseas. So there were a lot of from Asia and that. So we so they had a cooking educator there, Gabby, who ended up being called back to Cornell, and the manager at the time, the person who was running the program, she said, because I was working at the Hyatt at the time, I was working in the kitchen there. So I basically sort of coming out of Loughborough, I started working. I wanted to keep going with the chefing, so I started working as a chef, but not being fully qualified meant that I was working in some pretty sort of weird places around the place. But so I was working at the Hyatt there, and I can't say I really liked it, but they said, "Why don't you apply for the job?" And I said, "Well, I don't really know teaching. I don't really cooking is sort of something that's quite new to me." I said, "Apply for it." So I applied for it, and they gave it to me. So all of a sudden, I was learning, things like stock soups and sauces just before I was going out and teaching them. So, but it got me out. It got me out of the kitchen, and it paid quite well, and I quite liked it because it was challenging to get up in front of, there's probably a dozen students, but you get up in front of students and having to talk. And it wasn't something that I had done before, or thought I'd ever, or even something I was that good at it. But I loved the learning process. And then we also ended up doing that was going quite well, and they didn't want me to do another course. We did a course on international dining, so we basically sort of could pick any country, and we'd go and cook the food from there. So we're doing mostly Southeast Asia at the time. And because the school had a bit of resource, I was going up to Sydney and, sitting down with David Thompson and learning about Thai food and going and those sort of things. So I was able to sort of develop my food thing really quite well through that. I really liked it, and we'll sort of at that same time I was studying. I started studying viticulture, and we had our second child then, and so I sort of. It was fitting in quite well with doing the part-time work in the vineyard, a place called Deer Creek here. I was able to work with Rob and Kay there as sort of more part-time. That eventually I was getting a bit of paid money for it, but the hotel school sort of gave me that time where just once or twice we would go in there and teach, and we lived in Canberra at the time, so I was able to spend the rest of the time being with Lily and then James, and Jocelyn was able to keep going with her career, which was really important because obviously, as you know, it's very hard to sort of step away, and so we just decided that I was probably more suited to being at home because I was the cook as well than Jocelyn, so she would keep going, and I was very lucky to be able to stay at home and be with the kids when they were young and that. So the hotel school was great. I really liked doing that, and it just sort of it was just a nice sort of side thing that meant that I didn't have to go work in the kitchen. So I was basically working nights and Jocelyn was working days, and so it was really sort of hard to have that sort of relationship if you both worked in the same industry. Even though she was teaching, it was still hospitality. So
I know that all too well. That also led at one small point as well to you becoming a restaurant critic. Briefly tell me a little bit about kind of how that manifested.
Well, again, I'd sort of Jocelyn had left the hotel school was going through some change. It was bought by the Blue Mountains Hotel School. So and Jocelyn ended up running the AHS. So, but she got headhunted because her background was more probably finance oriented. So she got a job working as the business manager of one of the big schools in Canberra, Bradford College in Canberra. So she left that, and once she left, I felt I'd sort of I needed to do something else, and plus the wine thing was sort of becoming more like I was actually working a couple of days a week, getting paid for it by then, and so I left there and decided to just focus on that, and that was the same sort of time when I crossed over and started working with Tim at Clonakilla. And so one day the Canberra Times editor just rang me up and said, "Are you interested in doing reviewing restaurants?" And my first question was, why are you calling me for? Because obviously there was a food thing there, but I think maybe the education background for only a couple of years, so that yes, and again I said yes, okay, I'll give it a go, and I set out and I went out and they said, "I'll go to a restaurant, review it, and we'll see how you go." And so, and again, no schooling in writing at all. I left school quite early and went back to do this university with for when I was doing viticulture. So I wasn't that sort of great at sort of that sort of thing. So I went and did a review of a restaurant, and I took a sort of a fairly sort of not saying a humorous approach to it, but sort of a bit more of a light-hearted approach to what I was doing and that sort of thing. And they liked it, and so all of a sudden I was reviewing restaurants almost each week or second week for the Canberra Times, and it was fun at the time. I guess Ravensworth was still in its very infancy, like I hadn't really sort of popped up that much yet, so I felt it wasn't too much of a conflict to do the restaurant reviewing and that at the time, and I had fun. I guess it's a hard thing to do, but to be a critic, I never really liked the idea of when you went to a place and you were having a bad experience, and I really hated the idea that I had to go and say something then, because people have bad days, and people have so many people come to the restaurant industry, and as you know, you can't. It's a hard thing to come and be a critic. So I tried not to be too critical. I was sort of trying to tell their story and tell my story, thread it through it, and but then also we got to know some really good restaurateurs that have amazing restaurants and still going today, and you got to know them, so in the end, I needed a really good editor, because I'd sent her like one paragraph, 800-word paragraph. She okay. so she goes through edit it and all that, and
Is that where the tongue-in-cheek book has come from?
Yeah, so that's a bit after, so I was doing that for a while. Then they asked me to say, Kirsten Lawson was the editor, and she said to me she'd always thought about doing a column about men cooking, because and she said, they said, could you just do a recipe but aim it at sort of teaching men how to cook? And I said, yeah, I can do that. So they called it the first one was called Male Call to start off with, and then so I took on the persona of a hunter gatherer. So all of a sudden I was talking about sort of foods. We'll live on the farm by then. So we were living out here at Murray Bateman, and so I was talking about how things that we were doing to what locals were doing, and it started off just sort of simply cooking, sort of on the barbecue as you do with men's cooking, but it evolved into quite a big column. Essentially 1,000 words a week. Apparently it was quite popular in Canberra. It used to get put it, put it into digital format. Once gone to digital, got put into the General Fairfax, and I just had a lot of fun with it. The general manager at Clonakilla, David Reist, he was a real keen photographer, so he started doing the photographs for me, and we had just had so much fun cooking, and I had all sorts of things going on here. We ended up we were raising pigs here to do the whole salumi thing, to write columns about it. And then we thought we'd David has published books before. His wife's an author, so he said, let's do a cookbook. So we did published this cookbook from it was 1 year of the articles that I wrote, but we went back to the raw articles and sort of put them more the way that Kirsten was still involved, so she was still helping us edit them. But I was trying to put, you could be more you use different language. You know what I mean? With the book, so we end up publishing this cookbook, which is still available because we ended up getting it published in China because we tried to do it locally, but it was too expensive. So we had to get 1,000 of them made, which was way bigger than the market was. so you can still buy it. I'll send you a copy. I'll send you a copy.
I have been trying to get a copy, and I through a few different websites, and I've found it quite challenging. So if you've got a spare copy, I'd love to read it one day. I can just borrow it and give it back, but I'd love to read it. Now, I want to talk a little bit about your time at Clonakilla, because you spent 15 years as the assistant winemaker, a huge stint in your career. Tell me about what you learned at Clonakilla.
Look, I guess it was one of these things where, my role prior to that, we'd evolved to a contract winemaking business and at Deer Creek, and I can't say I really enjoyed doing that. I'd just been buying a little bit of fruit to make a bit of wine myself at the time. Avenue hadn't produced them, and I got to know Tim because he was the early days of the Shiraz Viognier. It just fascinated me. So, and Tim and I had a bit of a similar history. Like he'd been living in Melbourne as well, working in a winery. He was a teacher, but he'd been working at Nick's Wine down there. So we sort of had a bit of connection. We had kids. He had way more than I did, but we sort of had kids. We just just had our last child in 2003, and so we used to. Tim and Lara used to come over here, and we'd go over there, and then one night here, he just said, "Would you like to come and work for me?" And I thought, well, I'm a partner in a business up there. I can see where I was working from where I'm sitting now. But I said, look, I want to do it because I knew where Tim was at. His father had sort of was pulling out of the actively role in the winemaking. Tim was going to be the CEO. He needed to be the face of the business. He needed a winemaker to work with him to help grow that business. So it took a while, but I did it, and we started in 2004. I just started just prior to that. So the first thing I did there was to bottle the 2003 Shiraz Viognier, which was like one of their big. The first time they made about 10,000 litres at the time, which is quite a lot for a small business. And certainly at the price that was sort of at the time was about a sort of $60 wine. So it was very precious to that small business. And at the time, it was really just me, Tim, and his parents that worked there. There was another Michael Layeff was the other main person there, but it was a very small team there. And they had like a cellar door where we'd take turns to sell a door, a little cash box. There was no computer in the place, and they had this business that was growing really well. Like at the time, they were really getting well known for their product, and so it was a great opportunity. So I jumped ship and started working with Tim as the assistant, and we grew the winery. He eventually let me sort of run the winery, and we went from I think doing about sort of 90 tonnes to in full flight doing like close to 400 tonnes of production. We grew a whole new range of products through that time there, and it was great. Tim and I had a lot of fun. We at that time Tim was getting those first a la cartes. Like when he got the Langton's classification at the top rung there, we were up in Sydney, and I remember we went to Rockpool Bar and Grill, and just had this. I think Sophie was that's on there. So we just had this lovely meal there with a great bottle of wine, and just talking about, it's fantastic to this small little business that it's got this achievement, and it just went on and on from there. And Tim's just such a nice person, and yeah, we had a lot of fun. So when I left there, it was quite, a lot of people work there, and full start. They've got full big huge cellar door now that's fully staffed all week. And but yeah, I often reflect on that, and I pop over there and see them quite often and when I can, and it was just a really good time of my life. And Tim was very generous in letting me develop my Ravensworth brand over that period as well. So at that time there, all the Ravensworth was being made at Clonakilla. So I was making that on the side at Clonakilla. So it was, at the time, we were sort of still working out. We had a lot of partnerships going on in this business, and so we were sort of working out what we needed to be. And eventually we were able to buy the other partners. This in 2012, we had to buy the other partners out. And so it became just our business, my family. So, and then that was 10 years ago. So we'd grown. We were very small back then. So Tim let me sort of grow that business and was very encouraging. And certainly when I started buying all the weird things that I like to play around with when they started appearing at Clonakilla, like the ceramic eggs and concrete tanks and foodras and that, he was very generous, and it really helped our business. We were able to sort of, over that period then, sort of, it didn't have to pay me money. I was being really well paid at Clonakilla, and so I was able to keep the money in our business and have the money here to develop, because I knew when I left Clonakilla I wanted to be able to make wine like I could at Clonakilla, which meant having a really good winery, good equipment, good vessels. So we were able to sort of, over the years, sort of have all that here. And so when I left there in 2020, we had a full winery here, beautiful straw bale cellar, fully equipped, ready for vintage. That we didn't go ahead because of the 2020 fires, but we had a full thing ready to go here. So the transition from Clonakilla to here was very seamless for me. And yeah, I still wake up from weird dreams where I'm worried about Clonakilla's sort of that's not just Clonakilla. So it's still very much, 16 years is a long time to do something and not have an effect on you. And like everything beforehand, there's these people come into your life, and Tim's very much one of those that sort of that's a mentor, that sort of that takes you to the next spot. And I'm very, very thankful for that time. It really. I guess I hope that I was useful. The business Tim was able to sort of grow that business as he did, and so I think it was quite mutually beneficial. But I did enjoy it. But the time came to leave there. Yeah.
I can say, I'm sure with Tim's backing, that you had an absolutely huge imprint on that business, and I'm sure he is very, very grateful, as we all are, for your dedication to Clonakilla at that time. In true Bryan Martin style, you've talked so much about all these beautiful people you've met, and you always leave what you now do, your beautiful Ravensworth wines, to the very end. As you said, you have been, working with varieties that you love to play around with. You've got now certified organic 16 hectare plus farm, and you really kind of make wines that interest you with their very minimal carbon imprint. They are stunning wines that once you start going down the kind of little rabbit's hole of what you do well, you kind of never, I think, come out of it, because there's always something of interest, and they are made so beautifully with so much care. If you haven't tried, to everybody listening, if you haven't tried the wines of Ravensworth, which you have a lovely range, an estate range, a regional range, you also work with some lovely kind of fruit from the hilltops and Tumbarumba, but they are wines that you will be forever fascinated by. Total pleasurable drinking wines, but also just wines that make you think as well. Your son is now involved a little bit, is that right, in the kind of ongoing process at Ravensworth?
Yeah, he is. Yeah, so Lewis finished school 2 years ago, and he said to us, so he's one of the kids that went through year 11 and 12 during COVID. So he has a lot of time at home here doing his studies, and still trying to work out what he wanted to do. Like his brother and sister sort of had a bit more. They sort of, some ways, knew what they were going to do. He was sort of still not sure. He's sort of more artistic type, and so he said to us in year 11, "I want to do this," and we Joss and I were delighted, because things. That sort of succession sort of thing is a big thing in the industry. Is a lot of businesses don't keep going because of succession, and I could see very well what a succession can do to a business when obviously with Clonakilla. And he said okay, so he enrolled in year 12. He enrolled into CSU to do the same course that I did, the wine science course there. Went out and did his WSET 2 during the holidays, and so he'd sort of had a bit of experience with wine, but I grew up around, was born on the property, so sort of wine was something that he was quite familiar with. And during vintage, he and also his older brother would come over and help me with late night plunging and that sort of stuff. So they're sort of very much embedded in his mind, the wine thing. But turning out to say what we wanted to do, so we were delighted. So he. So 2022 vintage was his first one with me, and he just essentially I'd run the winery here myself. We have a couple of young sort of aspirational winemakers from hospitality that come and do some work with me during vintage, and I'm really happy to have them here because that's what I did. That's how I got started, so I'm always really happy to help them. So for Lewis, he was able to launch into the 22 vintage. It was quite a big vintage for us. We did sort of 130 odd tonnes, so it was which is probably about almost twice what I'd done before. So it was quite a busy year, and the winery was still in its very much a raw winery. We didn't have a lot of equipment sort of set up by then. But he liked it, and it was quite. He sort of in the first year of studies, he launched into that, and so he's into it. Like he just did a 3-month stint in the Coat team with a friend of ours who's actually one of the first interns at Clonakilla. Runs his own winery. They're called Domaine, Graham and Julie Bott, who's a fantastic producer. He sent one of his wines back here in 2020, one of his single vineyard sites, and he's just a great producer. So Lewis worked 3 months with him for the 2023 vintage, which was a great vintage over there for Coat. I think there were some problems in sort of the southern part of Europe, but Graham, they said great, and so Lewis was very busy that time there, and he came back with a whole new perspective on wine and also the business about how you go about making wine and that sort of thing. Because obviously in Europe, it's Graham, very expensive food he deals, very different, and they're carving vineyards out of rock there, and they've got vineyards in Condrieu and that sort of stuff there. So
amazing, that's so great. I'm so glad to hear that Lewis is involved.
He's into it, yeah, and he's got his own little brand that we want him to sort of have that experience of selling wine as well, because we sell through in Bebo, so we do a lot with them, but to actually go there and have to sort of knock on doors and try my wine, which I did early, is a good thing to do, I think. So he and he's also, we wanted to make sure that he knew the industry, so he's been working in hospitality as well. So he's working at a place called Paranormal Wines with a guy named Max Walker. I'm not sure if you know him, he used to be in Sydney, and also done a bit of work at Bar Rockford and such, and he does a yearly post-vintage stint at Wildflower Brewing in Sydney, so he does some work in the brewery there, but also they've got quite a neat little cellar door there. So for a young guy, it's not quite 21, he's thrown himself at it. So.
That's so great to hear. And if Lewis, hopefully you're listening to your father's sage advice, but you really have an amazing, amazing opportunity to be involved with such a beautiful winery, and I'm really glad to hear that he's taking that on board. And Bryan, you are someone that, looks for opportunity, keeps pushing yourself, is a real person of discovery and curiosity. And I see that in you every time we wine judge or whatever we do together. I can see that you're just a curious soul, and I am too. And I really love that about you. I wanted to give you, I'll have to wrap this up, so we'll have to do a bit of a rapid fire, but I wanted to ask you 2 questions. First of all, I want to give you the opportunity to shout out some of your peers' wines that you're drinking. So who out of, not your own wines, do you really enjoy drinking and buy each year? And then if you could only drink 3 drinks for the rest of your life, what would they be?
So I guess obviously we do. We swap wine with people and we buy wine. And so I guess some of the wines that I enjoy and look for each year, I love Dave and Steve's Salo wines from Yarra. I just think the Chardonnay is fantastic. And also in Dave Bicknell's the Oak Ridge 864 is like a standard. Anything that Josh and Owen do, I love where they're at. To me, they're they're obviously second generation, but I still feel like kin to them. And if I think about Lewis, I always think that seeing these guys take their family's business and just move them forward, and that is just fantastic. I love Nebbiolo from up in the Alpine Valleys and Beechworth. I love what Tess is doing at Vigneron Smalls and Brown. I think she's someone to watch. Recently was down there and went to a place to see Paula at Pippin Steel. She's someone that's so focused on Nebbiolo. Love that. In Adelaide Hills, I judged there for 3 years and got to know them quite well, but I tend to like the underbelly there, so I always sort of end up in the basket ranges. So, Commune and Buttons and, Sholto's wines at basket ranges. And honestly, Gareth at General Folk is such a lovely person. I love his wine. Just love his wine. Tasmania, Sam Connew at Stargazer, her wines are just brilliant wines. Likewise with Jim's down in Huon Valley, Jim Chatto. And my good friend Ricky Evans at Two Ton Tasmania, we've sort of spent a lot of time together. We sell through the same business, and I really like what he's doing up in the north there. I think he's a young winemaker that is really hungry for the business, and so there's sort of some people. Obviously, Clonakilla, because I've got a cellar full of them. so it's lovely to drink wines that are old now, that are mature wines. Sorry, that I made with Tim back at Clonakilla time. I was fascinated when that would come around. So so there's some of the ones. I mean, I love Hunter, Shiraz, and Semillon. Many producers, I think they're the wines that just sort of age so well. They're just sort of if you got to wait, but they're just absolutely stunning wines. So that's Tyrrells.
They are indeed. So if you're picking 3 wines, what are they going to be? I know it's a tough question.
Yeah, out of those there, I'd say the Salo Chardonnay. I'd say the Tyrrells, the Semillon, and I think I do like Chardonnay. I'd say Gentle Folk Chardonnay would be the ones that I'd sort of that's what I quite like those ones. Yeah.
It tells me a little bit about kind of your palate and when we're to meet again, what to bring you to drink. So, Bryan, I love speaking to you. I really hope we get to do some judging in 2024 together. Thank you so much for spending the time. You're such a wealth of knowledge and you've had a fascinating life, and it only will continue to get more exciting, no doubt. So thank you for spending some time with me today. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. I love that. Okay, bye-bye.
This is Over a Glass. I'm Shanteh Wale. Stay tuned for more stories from the world of wine and drinks. Listen in every Thursday on your podcast app. Follow us on Instagram at overaglasspod and contact us at overaglass@deepintheweeds.com.au.